With these lines, Mr. Walid, what do you think, from your wealth of experience, how did you have a real example of a successful IT transformation or digital transformation? What do we need? We need now, we know the business, it's gonna be disruptive if we don't change. We've been selecting the right teams and augmenting them in different roles and responsibility. What else do we need?
All right, that's a very
Tricky
not tricky question. It's quite an open question, and it might require a long answer. But in a nutshell, to realize what do you need to do to transform yourself, I think my colleagues here have spoken about two things, and I would like to speak about the third thing. Number one, there is a business idea that has to be in place. It's not going to start from IT. Let's just be clear on that. And then there is a change management that has to be in place to actually transform our people to adopt this new change. The third thing is that I also need to make sure and I will come to the example, but I will just set the stage.
Yes.
We need to understand where we stand today with respect to a couple of things inside our IT. Number one is, let's ask ourselves, do we have a service strategy within IT?
What do you mean, service?
A service strategy, i.e. how do we, in the new IT world, you actually consume IT in the way you consume Amazon, and I'm not suggesting that IT will become public, so just to be sure, but you consume IT like a product that you consume from your bank, from your telco, from your e-commerce system, and that does require us as IT to have a service strategy. And in the service strategy, I do not mean that you need to make sure that you identify all the services that you already have in IT and then start drafting a plan around them. You need to identify which services from IT will help the business transformation, and which services within IT are those who are consumed in a very dynamic way, and that requires IT to be quite responsive in provisioning or providing those services.
So the focus is business
So
services.
do you have a service management strategy? The number two is, where are we on the maturity scale with regards to our applications that exist today? And I will spend some time on the applications to also explain the difference between the past and today. And where we are on our infrastructure as well, because there is some transformation and some gaps. And then, how do we structure our IT today, or how should we structure our IT in the future to act very simply like a service provider inside our organization? Okay, so service management, look at your applications. How do you look at your infrastructure today? And how is your operating model? How are you structured today within IT to become the service provider that your business is looking for? Okay. On the application side, and I'll probably build on what Fadi has said. The main difference between the traditional applications and what we call the native cloud applications is, in the past, we used to create one big monolithic piece of code, which is hundreds of thousands of lines of codes to create one single app.
Service.
Right? In the new world, and by the way, we call them the legacy or traditional, and legacy and traditional will continue. No one is saying we're completely, transforming. We will have to keep the balance. So we will actually maintain a bi-model IT. One which is traditional, and the other one which is the native cloud application. The difference between the way we develop that monolithic application and the new world is, in the new native type of cloud applications, we actually develop small pieces of code. We call them microservices. And these microservices can be put together in different combinations to create different applications together. And that requires, without getting into a lot of details, a new way of building the infrastructure, because on the legacy traditional application, it's a scale-up game. On the native type of cloud application from an infrastructure perspective, it's a scale-out game.
Okay.
All right? So there will be an architectural changes that we need to identify from now. So when I mentioned the infrastructure, I mentioned how ready is your infrastructure to host those new applications. Let's be frank, the value in the IT comes from applications.
Absolutely.
I mean, everyone has seen Simon Welch at the beginning. Business only sees the value of IT in the applications, or mostly, to be very frank. But the application will not run properly if you don't have the right infrastructure behind it.
Absolutely.
And then, if you want to run your IT as a service, you need to have a proper service management strategy and a proper operating model that allows you to provision and ask or let the consumers utilize those services in a much more agile way and in a much more efficient way than what we are today. All right? So, having said so, we actually worked with one of the educational...
this is the example part.
This is the example. We worked with one of the educational bodies within the Gulf region. And the first thing we did with them to transform their IT. So they had a huge OpEx. 70% of their annual expenditure was operational cost.
Keeping the lights on.
Just to keep the lights on. And the first thing we did is exactly what I described. We sat with them and said, okay, what is the most critical applications / services to the business? And let's understand also the consumption model of those applications. Are these applications that are frequently changed or modified or require a fast response for provisioning? And we actually sat with them and built that service catalog.
Okay.
And the service catalog, in a practical way, does not actually include all your applications. Because there will be applications that will be modified once or even less than this every year. And they don't need to be consumed in the way that we just described. So we built that service catalog, and then we decided on how we actually take those applications to, either we keep them, or we rewrite them, or modify them, or we completely build new applications, because the new business models require different types of applications, services. And then we built that service catalog, and then we laid down a plan on how we can build an optimized infrastructure to actually host those type of applications. And everything actually was based on software defined. So the software defined IT gives you that flexibility to be dynamic, to be more responsive from the infrastructure side. We also worked on a plan for the transformation on the application itself, and we worked with them to restructure their team. So it wasn't a discussion around head count reduction or workforce reduction. As a matter of fact, IT, until 2023, at least this is the report I have, will have a 45% shortage in skills.
Oh, that's...
Just to be clear, it's not...
That's high.
Yeah, so automation will never reduce or replace people. It will just give them the chance to work on higher in the value chain, and then let the other stuff run automatically.
That's scary and promising.
So at the end, we were able to build a service catalog that people, to be very honest, developers within the organization, not the business users, can go to, request services, provision the services, and every service has a life cycle element that is defined within the service request. Once it expires, the service will not be longer available. And then we also modernize the infrastructure to help carry or host those applications. And we looked at the operating model, how we structure the IT to make sure that they are organized today to allow this kind of new way of doing IT. And I'll give you one simple example on that customer. In the past, to get a service provision, assuming that you have all the hardware and software, they needed a cycle of 2 weeks. And why 2 weeks? Because the security department has to sign off. The network department has to sign off and provision the IP separately. The compute guys have to provision the compute separately, and so on and so on. With the new way of software defined, everything was automated, and with the new structure, they have an architect who actually looks after the whole stack end to end, and they can provision this. Unless the structure was in place, you would have had very good capability, but you would have not been able to leverage that.
To execute on